I give her a warning. I said, listen, we would love to have you to visit, but you're going to like it.
Absolutely.
And you're going to want to stay.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Everyday Christian Podcast with your host, John Adam Goff, special guest, Jonathan Bates.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Everyday Christian Podcast once again. I'm John Adam Goff, and I'll be your host. We're excited about this new podcast opportunity. You know, it's really a product of a twofold mission. Twofold meaning one is outreach. We want to reach people that may be unfamiliar with the church. We want to reach people who are interested in knowing more about the church and about everyday Christians and how they live, the struggles, the challenges. And hopefully they'll become familiar with the church and some of its beliefs and will begin to ask questions and perhaps visit it. The second thing is we hope this is a source of encouragement. We hope this allows Christians, believers everywhere, to have a source of engagement with other Christians just like them, and allow them to learn some new things, hear stories of other Christians just like them. Everyday people with real stories. We're going to dive into some of their details of their lives, some challenges that they've come across, some victories that have been won, and we're going to look into those in great detail in the coming months. Got a lot of good interviews lined up with some really interesting people. Today is our very first interview that I'm really excited about. We've got with us today Jonathan Bates. Jonathan comes to us from Itawamba County, just outside of Tupelo, here in Mississippi. Jonathan was married to the former Paige Anderson in May of 2013. They were both 20 years old at that time. Jonathan graduated from Itawamba Agricultural High School there in Fulton. He has a bachelor's degree in elementary education from the University of Mississippi. He completed that in 2015. And upon graduation, he taught at Dorsey Middle School there, the 6th, 7th grade math class. So Jonathan come to Skyline, was hired as our youth minister in January of 2017. So we're excited to have Jonathan with us this morning. I consider Jonathan to be a good friend of mine that I've had the pleasure to work with there at church for the last couple of years, and really learned to respect him and to appreciate what all that he has to say. So, Jonathan, I'm going to bring you in now, and I got some questions lined up for you. I want to kind of drill you a little bit and get your thoughts on some things. So, before we begin, anything you want to say?
I'm just excited to be here. I appreciate you asking me to be on the show here, and I'm grateful for what y'all are trying to do with this podcast. I think it'll do a lot of good and being very encouraging to, like you said, the everyday Christian. So it's awesome.
So let's just get right into it. I got a lot of material I want to cover with you. You're a pretty interesting guy. So let's start with, I understand that you are a third generation preacher.
I am.
Okay. Yep. Your grandfather was a gospel preacher, then your dad, and now you are finishing there at Northwest Florida School of Biblical Studies. Tell me, and be honest. You don't have to give me the cliche or the expected answer, but tell me, was there any pressure whatsoever on you, either whether it was real or perceived, or maybe it was pressure you might have put on yourself to be a third generation gospel preacher?
Well, I don't think there was really any pressure there, just because my dad was a preacher and my grandpa was a preacher, and both still are. But I never felt pressure that way. You know, obviously, growing up as a kid, looking up to my dad, you know, I always respected him so much and respected what he did, and the godly man that he is and was with me growing up. So I always appreciated that. I appreciated how he, you know, just carried himself and everything that he did. And that, I won't say that really pressured me into wanting to become a minister, but, you know, obviously it encouraged me because I was able to look up to him and see that. But, you know, they were really going to encourage me with whatever I decided to do. You know, if I preached, they obviously encouraged me that way, but I don't think it was pressure to do it. My mom would always quote a passage from Ecclesiastes 9 verse 10 there, where it says, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. And that's what they drilled with us. I mean, they were there to support me and my sister both with whatever we were going to do, as long as we were going to be the faithful Christians there. So I don't feel like it was pressure from them to just the encouragement.
So this may be kind of the same question, or maybe coming off that same question. Was there a point in there? Was there a pivotal moment when you had began working with the youth at various churches you were part of that you decided, hey, this is what I want to do for a career. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. This is what I want to do for my occupation.
Honestly, well, I'll tell you, my dad was bivocational, I guess you would say. He had it in his heart that he wanted to be able to help congregations who were might not be able to fully financially support him and our whole family, And so the majority of my life, always, he was bivocational. He taught and he preached. He was a minister. And so as far as deciding to become a minister, to be a preacher, that was always in my mind back from, early teenage years. In fact, I remember before I even met Paige, that's one thing I thought about when considering this question was that before I met Paige, we started dating, we started hanging out, and we started dating, and it was like she knew this is what I was going to do. This is what I wanted to be.
You never told her. She just...
Well, we talked about it, and I think there might have been a time I was like, all right, now, you get this is what I want to do, and she was all for it, always encouraged me, wanting me to do it. She's great and helps me. I couldn't do it without her, honestly, no doubt.
So you said, I'm going to clarify just a second, you say that your dad taught and preached. I'm just let our listeners know that your dad was a college algebra teacher. Yeah. And that kind of coincides with your education there, doing, of course you're teaching elementary education, right, but still a math teacher in yourself. And that's something that I think must be in the genes, because I stay away from those numbers as I can. I said that you don't recall necessarily a point, but do you remember a point when you told your parents, hey?
Probably after, obviously I started out with kind of short devotionals. I've still got somewhere in a safe place my first devotional I ever did. And I mean, if I try to do it now, I could probably say it in less than 30 seconds, But after getting into doing devotionals and, obviously I was encouraged by my parents, by my grandparents, by all the people in church, they would encourage me. And, really, I guess just once I started doing it, I decided, hey, this is something I want to do. I love being around the church. I love being with these people. I love helping these people. And so but I will say I can remember, like you mentioned again, I think we'll probably talk about this a little bit later. Me and Paige, my wife, we got married kind of early, and we were still in school, and obviously I'll talk about that a little more later on, but I can remember looking at Paige one time, and, I was always taught, my dad, I think my granddaddy taught him to do this, but as far as a preacher, you need to have something there as a backup. If something goes wrong, you need to be able to support your family. Sort of
vocation.
Yeah. And so I have that background, but I want to be full-time in it all the time. That's what I want to do. Yeah. And so I guess that I can remember looking at Paige when we were both still at Ole Miss, and looking at her, and I think I was, which, don't get me wrong, I love teaching, and I would do it any day. But I can remember looking at her saying, this is what I'm going to do all the time. Right. I want to be all in, because having that experience growing up with my dad being bivocational, I could see how he was kind of limited sometimes as far as time and,
responsibilities otherwise. Yeah,
exactly. So
for you, it's like almost a little bit of a gradual thing. I mean, you started helping with the youth pretty early on there at your congregation there where you're worshiping, and then before long, it just kind of evolves into how you decide to make a go of it, I guess.
Right. Yeah, right? Pretty much. Yeah.
When you were picking out your major there to do elementary education, had you already decided at that point, or still unsure? Or was that part of the goal to be bivocational anyway?
Yes. Okay. And so at that point, I thought, hey, I knew I wanted to preach. There was no doubt about it. I knew I wanted to be a preacher. I knew I wanted to work as a minister. But at that point, it was still in the back of my mind, hey, I can do both. Yeah. And I'll be honest, we were already at Skyline, I think, like I was saying, we were at Ole Miss, Paige and I both were, and I can remember looking at her saying, man, I want to do this. to do this all the time, and I'll have this teaching for later on, it'll always be there as a backup,
That's right, yeah.
and so
you mentioned about you and Paige getting married at a younger age. I thought you were younger than you actually were. You're 20 years old when you got married. I don't know why I was thinking you were like 18 or something, but so I know I was married when I think I was 24, 25. I was imagining what I would be like 5 years prior, getting married. So can you elaborate a little bit on that? What was that like? I know you said you mentioned school, work, trying to be a full-time student and having a spouse and a home. How's all that work?
All right. Well, actually, I was 19. It was kind of
okay.
It's kind of a joke I have because I turned 20 2 months later.
Paige told me 20. So she
was 20 and I was 19. I'm younger than she is. So,
she didn't like to let that out.
Yeah,
I got you.
Yeah, it's a little joke, but anyway, no, it was definitely. I'm not going to say it wasn't hard, because it was definitely times that it was tough. Honestly, we got married. She had already. She started going to Mississippi State. She graduated there with her bachelor's degree, and I was still back at ICC for another semester. And, we lived in Tupelo. She commuted to Mississippi State, and she would come home, and several days out of the week, she worked at Hobby Lobby, and she'd come to work after she'd get out of school. So she'd work, and I worked during the day. So I'd get out of school, and I would work anywhere from the morning time to about 4:30. I'd get off, and she'd usually go in about 4:30, and she'd get off at like 9. So it's kind of funny because it seemed like there for like a year and a half.
Didn't see each other.
We didn't see each other until about 10 o'clock at night, But, I think it was possible because we were both focused. We didn't care about the whole college life. That wasn't what we were about at the time. Obviously we loved hanging out with friends and stuff, which we were still able to do that, but we'd been dating for a while already. We knew that we loved each other. We knew that we were going to get married. We were ready for it. So we didn't want to put it off any longer. And,
how long did y'all date? You recall?
It was about a year and a half. I think we dated about a year and a half. It ended up being about 2 years by the time we got married. A year and a half, we got engaged. So,
did you surprise her when you asked her to marry you?
Yeah, and that was hard because it was every day. She was like, if we're getting married this summer, you need to hurry up and ask my daddy. So that was a tough task, but I was able to surprise her. But
she kind of knew it was coming too, though, right?
She knew it was coming.
So you had talked about it, obviously.
Yeah. It was every day. When are you going to ask me? But, I think it was possible because we're both focused on the same thing. We loved each other, but most importantly, and that's what I'm so, I've been blessed because God blessed me with her. I ain't going to talk her up too much, but no. Man, she's focused on God. There are times where I come in and she's studying the Bible. She's right there to help and encourage me. Like I said earlier, there's no way I could do this youth ministry stuff without her. Right. Most of the time we're sitting there and I'm getting ready to announce something that's coming up. I'm terrible. I'm not organized. She is. Right. And man, she's there to say, don't forget this. She helps.
She's holding like up the teleprompter for you.
Yeah. Almost. She's like, hey,
don't forget this.
She'll usually write it down and hand it to me. And I'm like, all right, here we go. We're going with this.
So I know for a young married or young man who's engaged, that conversation with the dad has to be one of the most nerve-wracking things I've ever done. Was it the same for you?
Yes. I took him, let's say we went, I think I texted him and said, hey, can I get lunch with you one day this week? We went to Abner's. And I paid for his lunch because I was like, man, I can't invite him to come eat with me. So anyways, I paid for his lunch. I'm in school.
I'm working a pitiful job. Let me buy your lunch.
Yeah. So I paid for his lunch. We're sitting there. We got up to go throw our trays and stuff away to walk out.
You still hadn't done it. By the way,
I need to ask you something.
Oh, man.
So he said, yeah, let's sit back
Could you
down.
even eat the chicken? Or the whole time?
I may have ate like one or two pieces of chicken. He knew it was coming, and it was funny because we stood up and I said, by the way, I needed to ask you something. And he said, well, let's sit back down.
He knew it was coming.
Yeah, he knew. Yeah.
Well, I'll say that I've gotten to know Paige too, and there are a few girls that I think more of than your wife. So I think you've done pretty well for yourself.
She's a great one, man. She is.
All right, so now that you have graduated from Ole Miss, you've worked at Dorsey Middle School for a year. You're teaching math there, and you enroll in school again.
Yep.
You start preaching school there at Northwest Florida School of Biblical Studies. Tell me, you've been in there. How long have you been in? Is that a year and a half now?
So
I know you started a little bit of the.
It's kind of a long. I actually started the year I was teaching. Okay. I did one class a quarter, and that was all I could do because I was teaching. I was working with the youth and here at Skyline, and so full time.
But you're full time now.
About a year, full time. So
you've been there, for at least in some fashion for a couple of years, even. So I know you could probably go on for a long time telling us all the great things about Northwest Florida School of Biblical Studies. But tell me, what is at this point, to this juncture in your training there, what's the number one thing that'll stick with you?
So no doubt I have learned how much I didn't know. I'll be on, which I was never conceited about it or whatever, never thought about it that way. But man, I thought growing up, my grandpa's
church all my life.
Yeah. My dad's a preacher.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man, little did I know. Oh man, but it's been really good. I tell you, I think the favorite thing I've learned, I guess you would say, I've loved all my classes, but it's so in depth. And it's just so good. I'm learning so much. But one of my favorite things is being able to put the whole Bible together.
Yeah.
It's one that's what I love about it. And I knew, when you're talking about the Israelites, I knew that was connected to Jesus in some way.
Right.
But now I'm able to look at every book of the Bible and see how the whole Bible has built all the way. I mean, from the beginning of time, with Adam and Eve, God had a plan for Jesus to come and to save his people, and save the world. So that the whole scheme of the Bible, the scheme of redemption, everything leading to Jesus, everything working together to get to Jesus.
I had a similar moment like that. I was actually at ICC of all places taking Old Testament survey with Brother Seegers, in fact. And he, for the first time, made the timeline of the Bible. And like I said, just like you, not the son of a preacher, but I felt like I knew my stuff, or at least at this point. But when he had that timeline and he put it on the board and we had to copy it, and that's when the light bulb came up for me. I said, because the Bible's not in chronological order, and it's just random stories if you don't know how to put them together. Right. So I'd agree. There are light bulb moments in one's personal Bible study.
Yes, and I think what I like, because right now one of the classes is, we're talking about the minor prophets, and we're looking through, obviously, the classes are not all lined up. I'm going through minor prophets this quarter with Romans and Galatians and a couple of other classes. But as I study those books of the Bible, I'm able to know, all right, well, how does this lead to Jesus, or with the epistles now in the New Testament after Jesus, after Jesus had established the church, because that's what it's leading. Jesus saving and leading as king over his church, being the head of the church. And so it's amazing. I love it.
That just sounds like a good experience.
Yes.
So listen, before we take a break, I want to know what the best and the worst is of working with today's youth. So I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but I know there's some really good things, and that's why you do it. I know there are some other things that can be discouraging at times. So enlighten, and the reason I ask you this, Jonathan, because I want parents to know that the emotion and the ups and downs that a minister can have within the church, and how it can affect him by them, maybe being indifferent or
right.
I'll let you answer the question. Best and worst of working with you.
Yes, so I've been wanting to plug this in on here since we started. We talked a lot about when I decided that I wanted to be a minister and a preacher, and man, working with youth at Skyline, I love it. That's what I love to do. I like preaching, I enjoy it, but just we had a youth event just a couple of days ago. We had like 15 to 20 kids over at the house, and that we had devotional singing. I didn't know that we were going to be able to get them to leave from singing that night. We're just sitting around singing. They just kept asking, "Can we sing this song?" And I love it. I love that kind of stuff. But I love working with these kids. They're awesome kids, and they encourage me, man. They teach me so much, and that's some of the things you won't get anywhere else. So what's the best? You say what's the best?
What's the best and worst?
All right, best and worst. So I'm going to treat this kind of two different questions, I guess. So
okay.
I'm going to go with the best first because I love it,
right.
And I don't want it, but if I got to throw some worst in there, I'll put it at the end. But the best the main thing I think of is these kids are growing, and they're getting, we want our kids to grow. We want them to become responsible, to eventually, hey, they're going to be out on their own. And with me working with them, like that's the most crucial time of their life, where they're making that transition from being a kid to, hey, now we're about to be an adult. We're about to have to make decisions on their own. They're going to be on their own. And as far as that goes, that means they're going to have to be their own Christian. It's not mama making me go to church anymore.
Right.
I've got to go because I want to go, and I see the importance of why I need to be there because God wants me there. And so with that being the most crucial time with them building their own faith, man, I get to be a part of that.
Yeah.
That's one of the coolest things. I don't know who has a better job than that, to be able to be there every step of the way with these kids, to see them grow, knowing that I play that major role in their transition from them being a kid to becoming their own person, becoming their own Christian. And I tell you some of the other best things. I love when they get excited about topics in Bible class. Yeah. That's one of the things that makes me light up. When I'm teaching a Bible class, I've noticed one of the things, when I get fired up, they'll get fired up. Yeah. And so that's one thing. If you got a kid sometimes and you're wondering why they're not as into it, maybe if you're into it, a lot of times they will. They'll figure that out, and they'll want to be more fired up about it. Having them participate, and man, I try my best because they've got so much other stuff going on. You know what I'm saying? They've got so much going on at school and other areas of life. I wanna be able to, anytime where something else is going on that they might not need to go to, I want to be able to have something good for them there. Yeah. That they can go and they can be a part of. So and that's one thing I love. Especially at Skyline, we can talk about that more even later, but man, these kids are in it. They want to do it. They want to be there. And so if me and Paige, if we get something together, majority of the time they're going to be there. And so I love that about them. They're so encouraging to me to see their zeal. Most of the time you don't see, we got kids ages over at our house the other day. We call it PB&J's, right? Right. Sunday night PB&J's. Right. Paige, Bates, and Jonathan. So, I took the backside there, but that's okay. Anyways, we had from ages like 4th grade to college, yeah. And we only had a couple of the younger kids, but I wanted to go ahead and include them in it for sure. But how many times are you going to see people hanging out 4th grade to college? Yeah. You're not going to see that, right? Not much.
You think about it. Some of those 4th, 5th grade, they're looking at those 8th, 9th, 10th graders. They're heroes to them,
Right,
So
yeah.
Otherwise, you're not going to see that crowd mingling very often.
But these kids want to, and that's one thing that is I would say if I'm finding the best, that's one of the things that's best. These kids love being together. They love hanging out, and it makes me happy when they come up. Hey, can we do this? Tomorrow night or, right. Whatever it may be.
So before you answer the worst,
okay.
I want you to tell us about the situation Sunday night at the gathering at PB&J's.
This is actually this is the worst. Okay.
Oh, that's where you were going with it.
Well, I was going to include that in. Okay. What I was going to include with that, switching over to the worst things, is that you can't always be prepared for everything that's going to happen. Man, we had. I think we had 18 kids, if I counted correctly, which is great.
Yeah.
Man, that's awesome. And we'd been there. We'd ate supper. We had some good finger foods, and we went outside. We were playing. We had cornhole going on. We had spike ball. We'd already played another game. I'm not really sure what it's called. I guess I need to come up with the name of it, but it involves pool noodles and hitting people with pool noodles. So
Right.
It's fun. But we've done all that already. We're out in the front yard. We're playing these other games, and my dog, it was terrible, man. And like I said, you just can't be prepared for that. Like, we had all these kids in the front yard. I've got this big Great Pyrenees. He was
What's
a
his
year
name?
old.
What's
His
his name?
name was Colt, because this lady, man, she was driving down the road. I think there was a kid on a four-wheeler driving the opposite direction, and so she had to make a decision to drop off the side of the road. And my dog wasn't in the road, but she ended up hitting him, and it was.
Kids are out in the yard.
And they saw the whole thing. They saw him get hit. They saw him laying there. And so for a good 5 seconds, I froze. I was like, Jonathan, what do you do?
Yeah.
You
were like probably stunned a little bit.
I was.
Dog,
because
I got these kids here.
Yeah, that was my dog. First of all, man, so many emotions. That was my dog.
Yeah.
Then I've got 18 kids here that just saw this happen, that are staring at it right now. Dude.
They're going to have some counseling.
Yeah. So I looked over. I said, y'all go in the house. I got Paige. I said, Paige, go in there, just play Mafia. It's a card game, or play something, get their mind off of it, Yeah. And she says she walks in, it's pretty awkward because it's silent,
Like a wake in there.
Yeah. And luckily I had my good buddy Ty with me to help me load him up, and we buried him and
put him to rest.
We come in, they're good now. They're playing, they're laughing, they've forgotten about it, it's off their minds. But I felt like I needed to address it.
Dress the pink elephant.
Man.
Yeah.
And so we had a devotional, we sang some songs, and I always like to try to get really personal. I like to break it down, and so I'd already talked to them about just everyday things they go through, and just trying to, encourage them if they have problems, if they ever have questions about anything. I'm always there. Paige is there,
right.
Just whatever. And so after that was over, I said, all right, so I do have one more thing.
Yeah.
And I just kind of told them that I hated that
life is short.
Yeah. I hated that they had to see it. That's why I hated you had to see it. I said, but that kind of thing sometimes happens, and you never know when it's going to happen. So, and I told them that me and Ty had a good grave for him back there.
Yeah.
Got him buried and stuff.
So they were okay.
Yeah, we were good to go. They felt bad. I had, I got hugs from all of them, I think, telling me that they were sorry about my dog. So,
but I guess you said there was a kid coming down the road in the four-wheeler. I mean, better the dog than
absolutely
kids. That would have been horrible.
I just don't even want to think about that.
Yeah. So that's the worst.
That's one of the worst. And the whole point there is that you can't be ready for everything. You don't, there's some things that you just don't know. But also, I do want to plug this in there and say parents can be the best, and sometimes they can be the worst.
I think every coach in America would tell you the same.
Yes. And I don't want to just talk bad about parents, but man, a lot of these kids don't want to be involved or are not involved because their parents don't expect them to be involved or, encourage them to be involved. And one of the things that I've noticed is it's going to be hard, and your everyday kid is not going to just want to be a part of a Bible class, unless they're taught the importance to do it
or do memory work, learn 50 memory verses.
Yeah, exactly. And so we've got all we've got all these events. I talked about that. I love the fact that these kids love when we have events and stuff going on. So we got the Last to Leaders, and man, I tell you, Last to Leaders is a great thing. Maybe we need to talk about that a little bit more and explain what that is. Is just a program to get them involved in growing as a Christian, right? And taking over leadership roles, leading singing and doing speeches and learning how to do Bible classes. And
the good thing about Last Leaders to me is that stuff's not only helpful, obviously, within the church, But they're going to get to college and they're going to have to take a class called oral communications, and they're going to learn how to make outlines and to be able to speak. Right. And I think there's a lot to be gleaned from Lads Leaders other than what the church gets for it. Obviously, I think from a professional standpoint, from a career, it's a really, really neat program. And you're right, there's a lot could be said about that and the preparation and the year of Lads Leaders. But maybe we should do a separate podcast just to dedicate just Lads Leaders. So much to be said.
And other thing, we got Maywood Christian Camp we go to every year, and I'm going to say this later too about as far as Skyline goes, but I love the parents of Skyline. I have so much support from the parents at Skyline. I do. But man, parents, you got to push your kids. You got to encourage them, show them why it's important. They're not always going to want to do it, but if you don't make them, at some point, they're never going to.
They'll surely not die.
Yeah. And so one of the worst things can be, I've had this happen to me before where I had this, I'm not at Skyline, I won't say that, but where I'd planned, this big event, man, me and Paige, we've made food for this thing. We've announced this thing for weeks. I think it was a New Year's Eve party or something. We were going to stay up till midnight. We had fireworks I'd bought.
Right.
I mean, we went the whole 9 yards. You know what I'm saying?
This is your New Year's too.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I'm there. Like, I'm
young
taking
guy,
my time.
ringing the new year.
Exactly. Yeah. I thought, hey, what better way? Let's get these kids together and have a good time. We had went through, getting games planned, just all kind of stuff. And I think I had one kid show up. And I was like, and that's one of the things that can be so discouraging. Right. When you care so much about these kids, you care so much about the church family and these people and their Christian lives, and you put all this hard work into getting stuff planned, devotionals planned, anything, Bible classes, and then sometimes you just don't have them show up.
Nobody sees the work put in or the sacrifice, even of your time, unless you're the one doing it.
Yes,
I can
exactly.
empathize with you there.
So,
listen, you've been a great interview. I've still got a couple more questions though, so I appreciate you sticking around with us this afternoon. But before we go into the last half of our interview with Jonathan, I want to invite our listeners to be a part of our Bible class on Wednesday night at 6:30 p.m. at Skyline Church of Christ. Everyday Christians have questions, right? Have you ever asked yourself, how do we know the Bible is real? How do we know it's complete? Or how do we even know if the books that we have belong in the Bible? We're going to answer those questions and more in our study, The History of the Bible. It officially begins this week, Wednesday night, 6:30 at Skyline Church of Christ. So to finish our next questions up for Jonathan, I've got some good questions for him. I think that will help us all understand the guy a little better. Let me begin by, Jonathan, how tall are you?
6'2".
Jonathan is a big man.
Big dude.
Okay? He's a big dude. And I get tickled when we have a Sunday afternoon services, we have what we call the pew packers.
Yep.
Right? You get all the kids up there, divide them up into the older youth versus some of the smaller children, and you have that few minutes with them before the worship service. And I am amazed, and I want to applaud you of how good you are with the children too. We talk about how important it is for you to be with some of these older youth that those few years before they leave the home. But you're pretty good with the littles too.
I love all the kids. I do. I love little kids too, babies. I mean, I get up there and I try to pick up some of the little ones. Sometimes as we're singing "I'm in the Lord's Army" or something like that. I like picking them up. But I tell you, that is, which this is probably not a question you're going to ask, but that has been one of my challenges, because I know exactly what I can do with the teenagers. You know what I mean?
Right.
I know how to entertain them, but I don't have kids. I hadn't had kids yet. When it gets to little bitty kids, that's one of the things I've struggled with. Like, what do I do to
for the 4-year-old?
Yeah, for the 3-4 year olds. Those
That's where a helpmate comes.
What kind of event do I have? Yeah, exactly. Going back to the parents thing, I had several parents at Skyline reach out and say, hey, parents with little kids, say, we want to help you, because, they knew that I wanted to do something with them. They knew I'm, busy with a bunch of other stuff. So they said that they would host it at their house. I mean, I don't have anything for little kids at my house right now,
Right.
So that was awesome, So we're getting that kicked up, PB&J's at, somebody's hosting it at their house just for the little kids. So I'm
Right.
pumped about that too.
So you have separated PB&J. So you've got a youth PB&J's and maybe a smaller, younger youth PB&J's. I got you. So that leads us maybe to our next question. Challenges for our youth today versus what they may have had to experience in years past.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll be honest, I think of several things when I think of that. So, the Bible obviously talks about, we've heard it a lot, there's nothing new under the sun and that kind of thing. But there are things that have advanced. For example, technology. We got stuff now that we didn't have, just 6 years ago when I was a teenager, or 8 years ago. When I was 7 years anyway, so it's been a while, but I don't think of it being that long, but I can see things that they're having to deal with that I didn't even have to just a couple of years ago. So
yeah, it's changed a lot, even in the last 3 or 4 years.
It has, absolutely. And honestly, I've seen it even, like you said, in the past couple of years. I think the whole thing as a whole is the fact that society is pushing for people to accept things that, as far as God is concerned, are immoral, Right. And so society accepts it. And so what do except try to push an agenda, push it on other. Since society accepts it, they want everyone else to, And so what these kids are having to deal with is they're having to go through this and growing up. They're learning new things. They're trying to, man, it's hard enough to be a teenager as it is. But now you have, and what I mean by society pushing is, I'll be honest, I warn them all the time. I catch myself taking a couple of minutes every Sunday to just encourage them and try to warn them about being careful, especially social media. That's one of the
Right.
things, advancing technology. Hey, we had Facebook when I was in high school, but that was Snapchat. Yeah, used to with certain things on technology, if I was going to look up something I shouldn't be looking at, it took effort. I had to go in,
Right.
type it in, figure it out, and that's just how it was. But now you can get on Snapchat, scroll over one button, and there's access to just all kind of stuff that honestly a Christian doesn't need to be looking at in general. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And that's just slide of a finger. Boom, it's there. I noticed, and like I said, I try to warn them about that.
Yeah.
Because it is there, and that honestly, what do you do other than just don't have any of that? But you can't do. I mean,
You got to live in the world that
exactly.
you're in.
You're living in the world that you have, and so I just try to encourage them to. We read Philippians 4:8-9 where it says, Paul's encouraging the Christians there. To whatever things are true, things that are noble, things that are just, things that are pure. I quote this verse all the time to them. The things that are lovely, whatever things are of good report. And he says, meditate on these things.
Think on these things.
Think on the good things, because that's what a Christian's supposed to do. And that's hard for them when, they might swap over on their phone one time and there's an ad or something that pops up. I was actually talking to them just the other day about, and it's kind of funny. So I play a lot of the same games on my phone that, kids are playing today. I do,
Such a big kid.
Yeah, I'm a big kid. I am, but I noticed you can't play a game or you can't watch a video or anything now without an ad popping up. There's ads everywhere, and you just got to wait on it. There's no option other than to wait, to keep playing that game. But there are literally ads now that are pushing. There's some kind of apps, adult apps, I guess you would say. One of them's called Choices or something. It's crazy, but they'll show a little ad and it'll have this lady coming in and catching her husband with somebody else. And, this is on a game, just
Right.
a random game that you're playing, Tetris or something, which they're not playing Tetris,
Yeah.
they're playing these other games. But And so there it is, society's pushing it by that ad, and you see that. And so it's just like these things that are immoral are openly accepted everywhere now. They're norm, yeah.
I can imagine it's difficult for a child or even a young adult really to grasp what the Supreme Court of the United States says is legal.
Yeah.
And okay to do or how to live, or this is okay. When they pass laws that allow that to occur open and regularly, how the lines could get blurry between what's legal and still not right.
Yeah, absolutely. And that they've asked me questions all the time. Is this wrong? Is this wrong? And so I try to remind them the ultimate standard is God. We've always got to go back to the Bible, look at God being that standard there, and I just try to encourage them as much as I can because this is
sola scriptura.
Yeah, this is what's getting thrown at them, but no doubt, and I did want to, for any of the parents out there, not knowing what their kids, the games that their kids are playing, most parents probably don't even know those ads are out there, or Snapchat. I'm telling you, I know people have different thoughts on this, but I actually have most of my kids that from the youth group that have Snapchat. I've got them as friends on there, just because I feel like it'll help them a little bit to not be as tempted to not be as tempted to post certain things and, and to that kind of thing if they know that I'm on there and I'll be able to see it, and so that's good. But, you always need to be aware of what's going on and what they have access to.
I feel bad for them in some ways. We all made, dumb mistakes when we were young. But when you make them today, they're out there forever.
Yeah, and there's nothing you can do about it. But I was going to add to that, so along with the, just the open acceptance of the immoral things that go on, they're also having now to deal with that social isolation, because how many hours I spend on my phone, let alone these teenagers. Man, that's what phones is. Cell phones are like, they're life now. They're on that thing for hours and hours, and I'm hoping that it doesn't create some kind of social problem for them. You know what I mean?
It's still good to get out and be with friends and things like that.
Yeah.
So next question.
All right.
You've been at Skyline since 2017 now, going on 2020 in a few months. It'll be 3 years. Did you have any expectations of Skyline, and if you did were those expectations met, or what did you find that may have been a little bit different? But I want to say before you answer, both you and I have friends, not only at Skyline, but in churches all around this area, and I want you to tell them from someone who walks in the door that's not been a member of the congregation there at Skyline, what they can expect.
When you come to Skyline Church of Christ, you can expect to make friends. That's the way I think I'm going to put it. We have it's a family. I talk about that a lot to Paige, and I talk about that to a lot of people. But God talks about the church in a way, in a family sense. We're supposed to be a family,
right? And
I don't think that some congregations, some churches have that, but man, we do at Skyline, and that's one thing I love. And I don't know that I expected that, but that's one thing I know we have, and it didn't take me long to realize these people are best friends, and that's what if you want people that are going to care about you, care about your life, care about your family, care about your soul, and that are going to be there. If you need somebody to talk to, hey, they're going to be there every step of the way. If you need somebody that's going to, hey, where you at this Sunday? Is everything okay? It's going to happen. If you need somebody to hang out with on a Friday night, you're going to find it. You know what I mean? And you're going to find people that love God, and love being together. You
know how we are. We always got something going on. Whether we're playing volleyball at the state park, or fishing, if we're playing golf or hunting trips, or whatever that we're doing, just as friends first, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I had this mutual friend, actually. You would know her too, and she asked. She said, "What do y'all got going on at Skyline? I hear all the things y'all are doing. We may come and visit." I give her a warning. I said, "Listen, we would love to have you to visit, but you're going to like it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're going to want to stay.
Yeah.
So something to consider. And of course, I said that being a little bit of a joke, but I think that we have so many visitors, and doggone if most of them don't end up staying.
I know. Yeah, it's just hard not to after you meet the people. That's the way it's supposed to be. Man, we just love each other. We love being around each other.
So, final question, and it may be a little bit of a heavy one. Okay.
Okay.
So, in your opinion, we just talked about the world we live in today. We talked about the things that we face with social media and the liberal wing of our culture. What, in your opinion, are the top threats that are facing the church today? And maybe most importantly, how do we combat them within the Lord's church?
All right. So I've thought about this before, and obviously, the different congregations are going to face different problems, that kind of thing. But as a whole, if we're not careful, we can let contentment take over to the point where we're not doing our jobs as Christians to evangelize and to...
When you say contentment, just to clarify, do you mean contentment with where we are, with the physical things we have, or we mean status quo?
Tradition.
Okay.
We get content and to the point where we just sit there and hang out and we don't really grow, and that could be a serious threat because that's not what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be getting at it every day, working hard. And a lot of times you see it, and it's really sad. You see it in a lot of churches. No doubt we expect the minister to work, right?
Yeah. Well,
every Christian is supposed to work. The minister's not the only one that's supposed to be working. The elders are not the only one that's supposed to be working. The deacons aren't the only ones. It's a group thing. It's the church that's supposed to be working. And so don't be content with the people who are there because God wants and loves everybody. We got to be sure that we're not just settled with knowing my cousins that go to church with me and my other friends and we're good. We don't need to grow anymore. And I don't think people actually have that thought in their mind. Well, we don't want to grow. They'd probably argue with you on that. But if I'm not trying to work and if I'm not, the whole church as a whole is not trying to work and evangelize and get the gospel out there and talk to people and as far as that goes with traditions that are it can be a threat too because we get to the point where we've done it for so long we don't want to change it no matter maybe
right. What's the remedy?
Obviously, the number one thing is we want to do God's will. We don't want to push past that. And I think that might be why so many people have been so set on traditional things within a church or, so content with what they've done for so long that they hadn't pushed it because, well, we know this is okay. So we
just stay right here.
Yeah, so they kind of steer away from any other ideas that might come up, and I mean as far as like benevolence, things with benevolence that we can do, helping kids at school, make sure they have food on the weekends, or maybe one of the things we've recently changed our service time. A lot of people don't want to change that. Well, it's because we've done it for so long. Well, why do we do it that way? And it might be today, it might be better for everybody to have that early service every Sunday. And so that might be one example. We steer away from things like that. New ideas coming in, new thoughts come up, but a lot of times we kick them to the floor because we don't want to change things.
Right.
We're set with what we've been doing.
Something that's come to my attention maybe in the last few years is even within the church.
Yeah.
And these are faithful people that are doing their best to live right. They're active in the worship and they're active in their congregation, but their knowledge of the scripture is shallow.
Yeah, absolutely. That, and
we say that term, if you're not growing, then you're dying.
Yeah.
But if your faith isn't deeper than it was, if those roots don't go deeper, it's all the same.
Yeah. You know, if we're not growing spiritually, then we're going the opposite way, and that's absolutely that's.
And every congregation's got that, you know, those handful, those pillars, so to speak, that they that you really lean on and are seen to be so knowledgeable. But you get outside of those to the average day, you know, layperson.
Yeah,
man, the knowledge of the Bible is just not what you would think it would be, even within the church. I'm not talking about, you know, the guy walking down the road. I'm talking about within the church, and that's something I think it's gonna haunt us if we don't get it corrected.
That goes back ever since the beginning of time. You know, I think it's Hosea chapter 4 verse 6 where it says, "My people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge." Yeah. You know, that's talking about the Israelites. I mean, why were the Israelites destroyed by the Babylonians and others, you know? Well, it's because they had gotten so far away from God. Well, why? Because they didn't have the knowledge they needed. You know, they were destroyed for lack of knowledge. And we, you know, 2 Timothy 2:15, study to show yourself approved unto God. We use that passage that I think sometimes people in the pews now just hear that and they let it go in one ear and out the other, you know. But how am I supposed to live my life as a Christian if I don't know how? Yeah. If I don't know what God expects of me as a Christian?
That's a good point. So, you know, and we say all that, and we don't want to discourage those people to visit or to come if they don't know everything. Obviously, we don't expect that. Right. But come.
Absolutely, yeah.
And be willing to learn and be willing, and you know, to say, you know, I don't know, but let's see what the Bible says. Yep. You know, that heart, man, I love that heart.
Absolutely.
So I think sometimes people get intimidated because they may not know everything at Skyline, and I know other churches that are just the same, and they want people that want to learn.
I do. I'll add one thing to that, you know, too, going along with learning. Make sure you're praying. You know, I try to encourage my kids all the time at church about this. Pray as much as you can. What an awesome opportunity it is that we have at any point, any time during the day. We can just take time, set aside, and pray to God.
Free of charge.
God of heaven. You know what I'm saying? God that created me, created you, this whole place. We get to, you know, sit down and pray to Him. And we take it for granted so many times, but I think it will help us out with temptations that we face just in the everyday life of a Christian. It'll help us out if we start our morning praying to God.
Jonathan, I want to thank you for being with us here on our inaugural podcast. You're a great help and a great asset to the church here at Skyline. We are so excited to have you. I mean that truly. All right, Jonathan, before you go, got 3 rapid-fire questions for me. All right, don't think about it. Just give me what first thing that comes to mind, okay? All right. Favorite movie quote?
You need a Tic Tac or something because your breath stinks from Shrek.
All right. Favorite hymnal?
Favorite hymnal would be Jesus is Lord.
Jesus is Lord.
Yeah, let's go.
And final, and I'm going to let our listeners go with this one.
All right.
Favorite Bible verse?
All right. So the whole passage of Isaiah 53 about Jesus Christ. Love it, man. Read it.
Before everybody leaves, I want to invite you to come worship with us at Skyline. Service time is 9 a.m. for worship, 10:30 for Bible classes. We have them for all ages, and we have our PM worship service at 12:30 in the afternoon. And don't forget about our Wednesday night Bible studies, 6:30 p.m., the history of the Bible. One other thing before I let you go, we hope to answer your questions at the end of our shows. So email your questions to everydaychristianpodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's everydaychristianpodcast@gmail.com. Tune in next time and hear your question answered on the show. Until next time, y'all be good.